Welcome to the Generation Why Not podcast with Ruth Klein, a 6-time best-selling author, creative brand strategist, and book coach for small businesses, entrepreneurs, authors, mompreneurs, and professionals today. She is the president of the award-winning firm Expert Celebrity Branding, and the Wall Street Journal calls her the marketing maven. This podcast will be interviewing this generation, those who are doing things differently because of their perceptual shift of what success looks like, and who are driven by attitude, not age. They know anything is possible, and you'll hear how this generation feels the fear and keeps going anyway to achieve their goals and dreams, whether they be in business, sports, the arts, or lifestyle.
Welcome to Generation Why Not. My name is Ruth Klein. I'm thrilled to have you back. And Generation Why Not is a generation that is not based on age, but rather it's based on attitude. And there's so many fun points that make up Generation Why Not. For example, Generation Why Not often will not accept no for an answer. They might hear it, but they don't accept it. And what happens in that case is they're very resourceful. They figure out a way and they make it happen. Because at the end of the day, they're always asking, well, why can't it work out this way? Why not? So today we have such a guest who basically said, you know what is going on in the medical arena with food and things of that sort, I'm going to do some research and I'm going to see some things that might be better. And at the end of the day, why not share this information in a big way to the world at large? So today I have Dr. Josef Arnould, and he is a certified chiropractor. He also is the author of The American Diet Revolution. It's basically the Strength for Life guide to the foods we must and must not eat to be lean and healthy in the 21st century. And I will tell you that this book is based on some of the most honest and up-to-date nutritional research of the past 2 decades, because Dr. Josef Arnould has done, I'm just going to call him Dr. Joseph, his work is really how to prepare and purchase and eat deliciously nutritious food in a far too hectic contemporary culture. And I know that we all can feel that as well. But at the same time, we need to know how to be truthful with all of the dietary advice that we read and see and hear. And this book, American Diet Revolution, does an excellent job in cleaning all of that up, making it very, very clear as well. And I love what Dr. Joseph has on his website here. Dr. Joseph's conscious, his education, his clinical and personal experience, and his direct observations of human behavior have led him to believe this: how well we eat and how well we exercise are the most important factors for our long-term health and active well-being. And there's one more piece that I want to share with you, well, maybe 2, because there's just so many good pieces here that Dr. Joseph shares. Good health is essential for your personal freedom. And then this piece here, I love what he has to say. I believe each of us is our own primary health provider. Although professional healthcare providers, including himself, always try to deliver effective treatments to those who seek their services, the foundation of personal health is self-care. Very, very rarely do I hear that coming from a doctor. Please help me welcome Dr. Josef Arnould. Hi, Dr. Joseph.
Hello, Ruth. Thank you very much for that introduction. It's nice to hear your voice.
Thank you. I could go on and on and on. I just love what you do. I love what you stand for. I love how you walk your walk and talk your talk. It's inspirational. And I love the recipes, the really healthy, delicious recipes that you put out as well. So thank you for all of that.
It's my privilege. I enjoy this.
Good. So let me ask you, what do you do and how are you different? How are you different than other doctors in your industry?
Well, to answer your question, Ruth, first of all, as you have already indicated, I am a doctor of chiropractic, and I specialize in two things: exercise healthcare and nutritional learning. And I've done this for 40 years now. I'm in my early 70s. I say exercise healthcare because the preeminent goal of exercise should be to enhance our health, to enhance the qualities of health for which we each strive. For instance, to increase our strength and flexibility, to improve our not only our cardiovascular fitness, but our respiratory fitness as well. To improve our body composition, not just to increase muscle, but also to increase our bone mass, as well as, of course, to decrease our body fat. And then there are some other qualities of health which I think are very often neglected. One of those is posture. We cannot let gravity bend us down as we age. So we need in our exercise plans to work very hard to improve our posture. And another quality of health that is very often ignored is what I call balance, agility, coordination, and equilibrium. So this is particularly important as we age because the number one cause of accidental death of people over 50 years of age is falling. So those of us who are aging a little bit have to be aware that not only is there a danger of falling, but we can do a lot about it. Each one of us can become an activist for our own health, as you say, our own primary health provider.
I love that. And what was that fourth? It was balance, agility, coordination, and
equilibrium.
Equilibrium.
Yes. For instance, what a lot of people don't know, Ruth, is that about 1/3 of our sense of equilibrium comes from nerve endings in our neck, in the joints and muscles of our neck. They're called proprioceptors, and they send signals up to our inner ear, to what are called the semicircular canals. And those semicircular canals, which act like gyroscopes in our ear, are essential for balance. So if we get a stiff neck, for instance, if we don't maintain the strength and flexibility of our neck, we lose our equilibrium. It diminishes by as much as 1/3.
Wow. And I know that people that are elderly, my uncle, my goodness, he had heart disease, he had diabetes, he had many surgeries, and he lived to be 90, and the only reason he died is because he fell in his home and he hurt his hip. I always wanted to know, why is it that an elderly person, when they fall, many times they can't pull out of it? What happens to the body there?
Well, there are a number of reasons. Number one, of course, if we're in our 80s or 90s, we don't heal quite as fast. And very often, of course, if there's a fracture, and quite often, believe it or not, a lot of fractures of the hip and the femur happen before the person falls. In other words, the bone actually fails, it cracks, the fracture happens, and then the person falls. And then when they hit the ground, then the hip or the femur shatter, and then it's beyond repair. So,
wow, I had no idea. So, how do we keep? I mean, what are some things we can do to keep the equilibrium and the agility and all balance? What are some of the things we can do?
Well, that is an excellent question. And two things which I think are very often ignored, and as I've already mentioned, we need to do exercises to keep strength and flexibility of our neck. And that's not a very sexy muscle, okay? People often ignore that. Although if you do them, believe me, if you do them religiously, it'll help you getting multiple chins. And it'll also help prevent developing kind of loose skin in your neck. But more importantly than that, what a lot of people don't do is enough hip exercises. And again, they aren't quite as sexy as abdominals or biceps or a lean waistline, but hip muscles need to be developed just as importantly as the others. They're what I call tweener muscles. They're not glamorous, but they are the muscles that support us in so many of our daily activities. Hip muscles, for instance, just getting in and out of a car or operating the brake and accelerator successfully and quickly in case of an emergency, to a large extent depends upon the integrity of those hip muscles.
Wow. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I don't hear a lot of the neck and the hip exercises unless something happens and I end up going to physical therapy or something, and then they'll give me exercises, and all of a sudden different parts, and it's not the abdomen that they're talking about. They're talking about hips, or they're talking about the shoulders, or they're talking about the neck. And of course, this is right up your alley, isn't it?
Well, yes, but in truth, Ruth, it's up all our alley. We all need to.
Well said.
I mean, the real purpose of exercise healthcare is to enable us to do the physical things in life that we have to do. Like in New England, it's shovel snow. In California, it's probably surf. And the things that we like to do, like swim or hike or bike or whatever those physical activities, be able to do them as well as possible, as long in life as possible, and not injure ourselves doing them. Today, they call that functional health care, but when I started to do it 40 years ago, I just called it exercise health care. But it still comes down to the same thing.
Right.
We are responsible for our health.
Yes. And let me ask you, how did you know to do this 40 years ago? Because functional health, that's relatively a new term. How did you know to do this 40 years ago?
Well, to tell you the truth, Ruth, when I was in high school, and that's when I actually started to do strength training and other exercises, and I was, a high school athlete like a lot of people. But I also started to read nutritional books at the same time. So that was 55 years ago, and I'm still learning. As far as I'm concerned, each of us is a learner. We are, that I think is what separates us. We either are pacifists or activists. And an activist is a learner, someone who is willing to learn new things and try to stay up to date on what's going on, rather than being a passive acceptor of information which is given to us, and there's a lot of times is not reliable. But if we're not a learner, we're not able to distinguish the difference between fact and fiction.
I love that. In your book, The American Diet Revolution, there's so many good parts. For this podcast, just to get some appetizers going, what are three points that you make in the book that it's worth sharing today? Okay.
Well, I've alluded to some of them already, but let me. The first one is, and the first part of the book is primarily a history of dietary advice in the United States in the 20th century. And a lot of us, even today, are still confused, but we were very confused in the last half of the 20th century, from about 1960, 1950, up to the year 2000. And we accepted the information that was given to us because we thought it was given to us by honest researchers. The best example is the food pyramid of 1992, in which we were told that each one of us should eat 7 to 11 servings of whole grains per day. Well, I can tell you, for 35 years in my practice, I've had everybody do a 1-week nutritional diary of what they eat, and then help them change their diet if necessary. And I can tell you that no one who eats 7 servings of grains per day, cereals, breads, bagels, muffins, you name it, crackers, cookies, loses weight successfully, is successful in decreasing the body fat. We were, I think, influenced by the propaganda that we should eat these grains in great quantities to such an extent that we became obese. In the meantime, in the time in which that information first came out, in the early 1960s till the year 2001, a 40-year span, obesity in the United States increased from less than 14% to more than 33%.
Wow! So, in 40 years, because of that information. So why were we given that information then?
Well, that's what makes me really angry, and that's why this book is entitled The American Revolution, because the more I read the history of this false information, this propaganda, the more angry I became, and I became convinced that nothing short of a real revolution in what we're eating could help us reverse the course. So, fortunately, in the 21st century, we have a lot of very good writers and doctors and researchers who have given us some honest information, such as William Davis in the book Grain Brain, or David Perlmutter David Perlmutter wrote Grain Brain. William Davis wrote Wheat Belly, but there are dozens of these excellent books that really give honest information. But in order to understand it, we have to be willing to read it. Now, the reason I wrote The American Diet Revolution is some of the information in those books is confusing, a little too technical, and I wanted to give people one area where they could kind of get a synopsis of all of that information. But I don't want them to accept my point of view. I want everyone to become an active learner and reader. And I think that's where we got into trouble. So that's my major point. In the 20th century, we were duped. We accepted.
Wow.
We weren't vigilant enough. We took it for granted that was honest.
Can I just ask you something here?
Absolutely.
With the obesity, and you know so much about these kinds of things. In your research and observation, did you also find that cancer increased from during that time, those 40 years, and maybe up until now even? Yeah,
well, I think there definitely has been an increase in cancer, but there are many, many reasons for that, and I don't want to just shoot from the hip and say, okay, because there's been an increase in cancer, it's due to diet.
Right.
Because there are so many other factors which have entered into our lives. The air pollution is much worse now. We didn't. Water pollution is greater. So we're subjected to a lot of forms of adverse health conditions, which perhaps we didn't have then. So it would be a little bit oversimplifying if I were to say, diet's only responsible.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Just think of computers. Think of how much we're exposed in front of computers. We don't know what the long-term effects of that are. For instance, on breast cancer, if a woman is exposed to especially the early TV monitors, now we've forgotten that there was radiation coming out of that, and then for a while they had screens that you would buy to put in front of your computer.
Right.
And now the monitors are much different, but there are a lot of factors. That's my position there. So
okay, perfect. That sounds good. So I think you were at number 2, the second piece you wanted to share about the book.
Well, my second point I've alluded to as well, and that is that you and I and everyone out there is a benefactor of a lot of honest nutritional researchers in the 21st century. And this movement really began right in about the year 2000 with a book, an article by a writer named Gary Taubes, who wrote a book, What If It's All Been a Big Fat Lie? And he was the first. And you notice he put it in terms of a question, and that is so important. He's saying, he's not saying it's been a lie. He's saying, hey, what if it has been? And what are you going to do about it? The point is we need to become activists, each one of us, because if we're not activists, then we are the victims. We're the helpless victims of whatever information is given out. And we need to question, there are a lot of people now who are questioning things, and that is a very good thing. There's a big movement now to go to 5G. Well, we don't know what the effects of, because that's going to require increased density of transmission of electronic information and signals. What are the effects of that going to be on our health? Well, if we just sit back and say, well, let's see what happens, then 5G will be here and 6G, and who knows what the ramifications of that will be. Right. Well, the same thing obtains with food. So it's a larger issue. So that's the second thing that, the 21st century is the era of nutritional and dietary activism, of questioning, inquisitiveness, not accepting what we're given. And then the third thing that I want people to really think about is from a very practical point of view, and then this is a growing movement too, and that is purchasing our foods from as locally as possible, getting them from people we know and trust, and cutting down on the transportation needs. It makes no sense for us to purchase kiwis from New Zealand or Australia. Right. Once in a while it's okay, but as there are so many wonderful growers out there, local farmers who are growing organic fruits and vegetables, who are raising pasture-raised animal products. We need to support those people because they are our lifeline to really healthy food, and we need to support them. I live in a small town of 14,000, and we have a new butcher in town who just does pasture-raised animal products. Wow. We have a new food co-op in town. Well, it's being built, actually, and it specializes in locally produced produce. So it's like we're reinventing the neighborhood, if you will. Our food supply, we have control over it. If we get our food from General Mills or Quaker or whatever, I mean, we're just a number on the chain. That would be my third message: is buy local, love local, support local. Know who's growing your food and give them your thanks and support. So
I absolutely love that. And so I'd like to ask you, was there a pivotal moment when you may have thought that, let me ask you it this way. What was a pivotal moment in your life that gave you even more momentum towards what you do now?
Well, I think that's actually a fairly easy question to make. I was actually in graduate school studying exercise physiology, wondering what I could do to help people be healthier. And I wasn't quite sure on what avenue of a career I would choose. I mean, the avenues in exercise physiology are really very limited, to working at a university, for instance, or, in research or something. But the opportunities are few and far between. And it just happened that one day I went into my local doctor of chiropractic in Vermont. And because I'd been studying exercise physiology, I'd always been peppering him with all kinds of questions about anatomy and physiology. And one day he said to me, here's an application to go to chiropractic college. You know enough now that you should be a chiropractor, and I'm telling you that. He gave me the information. I took it. By the time I got out to my car and got into the car, I said, he's right.
Wow.
Because it is a profession which allows the practitioner to practice natural health care. You're not really subject to or under the control of any pharmaceutical company. You have the right to practice as you want. You don't have to worry about the side effects of drugs. You can advocate for good nutrition. You can advocate for exercise. So it was a natural healthcare profession, which was just waiting for me to discover. I'd never really considered it until he said it. But within 5 minutes, I realized that he was right. And 40 years later, I'm still very happy with the opportunity that he gave me, because it has been that way. The other pivotal moment came after about 5 years in practice, and I started to see people that I've, seen fairly frequently, maybe once a month or once every 2 months or maybe once every 6 months. But I began to notice, and I could feel from the texture, especially their spinal muscles, that they were disintegrating right in my hands. I could just feel the loss of integrity, the increase in body fat, and the loss of muscle strength right in their spines. And I said, I've got to do something about this. I can't just do chiropractic adjustments and help people in that way. I have to be a much more forceful, make a much more forceful impact on their life. And the only way I can do it is to increase their strength by advocating for exercise healthcare and improve their nutrition to advocate for what I call nutritional learning, because never accept what somebody else says. Each one of us is only a learner. So those are the two pivotal moments in my professional career.
Oh, I didn't know that, Dr. Joseph. That's so interesting. That is so interesting. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your heart and your interest in having each one of us question, not to take anyone's information, including what you've shared, just as is, but to listen, to read, and to make our own decisions. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Ruth. It's an absolute delight to be with you, to talk with you, and learn from you any day.
Thank you. So I just want to share a couple of highlights that I picked up from Dr. Joseph. And I loved his story. I loved everything, actually. But this one pivotal moment where 5 years into, he could tell by the spine that the person was gaining more fat, and it was just amazing, and knew that he had to do something else to make a bigger impact. I find that exquisite. And he's been doing that ever since. And those two areas are that exercise healthcare, as he calls it, and nutritional learning. And the fact that we're all learning, and that it is a lifelong type of learning, which of course I love and I agree with 100%, because things change, we change, new research, new information, so much happens, and I love that. The fact of this, the posture, how important that is, and how as we age, how that changes. And this idea, I love this 4-piece here, this balance, agility, coordination, and equilibrium, how they go hand in hand. I remember I had a wonderful, wonderful fitness instructor, and she would always say, Ruth, you're in good shape and you want to keep it that way because you want to be in balance. Because if you lose your balance, that's when the real problems happen. And so she focused on balance. And Dr. Josef does as well, all of that. And it's interesting, I had no clue that a third of our equilibrium comes from the nerves in our neck. That is just remarkable, and it makes perfect sense. And this idea of functional health care, that truly is the way to go. And almost all my doctors are functional practitioners because it makes so much sense to have that. So I hope you enjoyed our time together. And again, hope you're part of Generation Why Not, because everyone that we interview on this podcast is. Until next time, I'll see you then.
Thank you for joining Generation Why Not. We look forward to receiving any questions you may have, as Ruth will be answering them on this podcast. Follow Ruth.Klein on Instagram or email rklein@ruthklein.com. Until next time, a short reminder that success is driven by attitude, not age.